We want to talk about the day today. So our conversations from now until the end of the show will be looking at the various things that are happening in the country, our politics. Now we are joined by the Member of Parliament for Embakasi North constituency, the Honourable James Gakuya. He's here with us in the studio. Good morning, Mheshimiwa.
Good morning to you.
Karibu sana to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Shukran.
That is called the hot seat of the Situation Room. Make yourself comfortable.
I am.
It's going to be a lovely ride. Mheshimiwa, you're also the chair of the National Assembly's Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives.
Of course, yes.
Hiya. Ebu first introduce us to Embakasi North constituency. What are the boundaries of Embakasi North?
In short, Embakasi North is one of those 5 constituencies that were hyped from the Ranja Embakasi. And the boundaries of Embakasi North are purely those who understand where the dollar is. Dandora, or the borders of Dandora as it is, that is purely within Embakasi North. But as you go slightly north, it was amalgamated with a ward which was hyped from Kasalani, and that ward is Kariobangi North. Kariobangi North is where is formerly known as Bangala.
Yes. Bangla.
Yes.
Okay. So Embakasi North is basically Dandora.
It's basically Dandora because Dandora has 4 number of wards. Now it makes 5, including that Kariobangi.
Okay.
Yes.
You're a member of the Kenya Kwanza Alliance. You're elected on a UDA ticket.
Yes.
You have seen, of course, what's happening today is members of Azimio have called demonstrations to protest against several things and demanding several things of the Kenya Kwanza administration. Some of them are your fellow members of parliament. Some of them are your neighbors in Nairobi. And the issues that Azimio is raising include the high cost of living, saying the cost of living is so high and the government does not seem to be addressing this high cost of living. Talking about appointments into government, that appointments in government appear to be heading in a certain direction, that there is only a select group of people who are getting into state appointments, and these go tribal as well, and so on and so forth. The reconstitution of IEBC. These are complaints that have been clearly stipulated and stated by the Azimio coalition. Do you think they're justified in saying, let us, because the government is not addressing us, let us address the government in a better way by pouring out in the streets and using our power to picket?
One thing, let me say, our constitution stipulates what we can say picketing and the peaceful demonstrations. This is ways of redressing to those maybe who feels that probably they have a pressure and they want to release the pressure. And by the current way of grammar, I would say this one don't seem to be justified. One is that, in fact, once you say that we are going to have this mass action because the life is unbearable, or maybe it's becoming harder. Everybody should also understand where we are coming from. And we are coming from a situation where life was so harder than today by the exit of the former president, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, who happens to be in hardship with the former prime minister. And I remember as they exit, the unga was somewhere close to 230 Kenya shillings. Today, unga is about somewhere 170. I would say that, in fact, by then there was a proposal that there was a saying that there was a subsidy, but it was a subsidy which was not working because we were being told that in supermarket shelves that you can be able to get a 2 kilogram flour of 100 Kenya shillings, which was never found. Therefore, I would say that one is not justifiable, and also people should also take consideration that this country is also experiencing a very hard drought, which has taken a prolong, and that has not been giving us good result in terms of what we have been expecting from our farms. In terms of issue to do with the IBC reconstitution, I will also say it's not justifiable. By the tail of the last parliament, they brought amendments, and that amendment was between the handshake, and that is when they introduced new way of forming a panel that takes care of nominating or appointing the commissioners. And that is when they came with those other bodies that are supposed also to present a representative in that panel, where the Parliamentary Service Commission has a slot, and many other bodies have the slot. Today, the Azimio fraternity is purely against that procedure, and they were the part of those amendments. Then the big question is, why do you want to dig a big hole? And at that point, you are not very sure whether you are the one to fall in the same hole. Because to whom were they digging for? It tells you that if today they are against it, then it tells you that actually they were digging the hole for others to follow into.
But that amendment has also been re-amended by this parliament. The initial amendment that you say was done by the Handshake Brothers of the IBC Act, which changed the selection panel, has now been re-amended by the 13th Parliament.
I am not
so that now the new one is the one that now has, members of the Public Service Commission, the Parliamentary Service Commission. It has brought in the political parties liaison, which was not there in the previous one. But the one that appointed Cherera did not have this kind of members.
What I'm saying is that, in fact, after the amendments, those amendments never follows to the current. It follows to the next. So that's why it was not part of the Chereras, but the amendments were done at that period. I have not seen any new amendment currently, except those amendments that were done at the tail end of that last parliament. And coming now to the area of appointments. Appointments, I would say, anybody who lives here understands very well how our constitution stipulates. And the constitution stipulates that all regions has to be taken care of in terms of appointments. And going to the appointments which have taken place, because those appointments majorly is the cabinet, the PSCs, and the CSCs. To me, there is no single region which has been left behind, including the Nyasa region. And in terms of the last concluded CAS appointments, I have seen almost phone number from Nyasa region. So if you can tell me that, in fact, it is not taking care of regions, then that is wrong.
Mheshimiwa, you say you're not certain. Unfortunately, this particular bill, it's on record that it was witnessed not just by the Speaker of the National Assembly, but his co-Speaker of the Senate. And these changes, if I read what is in the Standard today, the issue of the Cherera for being reinstated, that is what the Standard has indicated. But if I look beyond this, and I look at the fifth issue, thorough review of laws, not piecemeal reforms, in my mind, this is what they're dealing with. Okay, there are reforms being made, there are amendments being made. This is normal. But the amendments, especially when we look at the electoral body that we have in this country, they have been a bone of contention from time immemorial. This is not a new thing. It's always an issue. What is it then that must be done? I'm asking this question. Should we go back to reviewing, as I said, the entire constitution? Should we put back that commission that had been set specifically to oversee the issue of the implementation of our constitution, so that as we go through this process, it isn't this party and that party, that there's a commission that is actually looking into this thing and making sure we guide it properly so that it stops being a bone of contention. Because if you have one political party pushing an agenda, the other one will oppose it. That is for sure. It doesn't really matter. if Raila's side of the political divide had started this issue, somebody on the other side would have found ways of opposing it. What do you think?
One thing is that, in fact, there is no single registration that will be 100% acceptable to everybody. There has to be, and that's why there is always a vote. There is a vote where they require 2/3, and there is a vote that requires simple majority. And that vote casts the decision of the majority to take their day. But that does not mean that there were opposing group of that particular registration. In this particular case, I will refer you back to the constitution we are in. By the time of promulgation of this constitution, it was well discussed, and most of the issues were agreed at Naivasha. But remember that by then, we were having a position of prime minister, which was by then abolished. But it was abolished because nobody had interest of it by then. And that's why I did remind you that, in fact, you may dig a pit, but actually not knowing that you are the one to follow in it. Remember that, in fact, then that is when we had the issue of Hague, where Uhuru Ruto team were at that, with that particular big case on their neck. And nobody was very sure that actually they would be allowed to contest. And that is the reason why nobody was eager to think about the prime minister position. But what happened today? We have the clamor of the last amendments of the constitution, where this position of prime minister and deputies were an issue. But why are we coming back to such a amendment, when we has a room to put it in the constitution during the writing of the current constitution? So I would say what is here is that sometimes we become hypocrites because of what we intend to. But when we fail to catch what we are looking for, then it becomes a clamor. In this particular case, I want to say that, in fact, the laws that are here, which governs the manner in which to constitute the panel of ABC, it does not matter. But it matters to political parties, because political parties have the serious interest. But one time I would tell you that, actually, whether it will be Kamau, it will be Ogora, it will be who. As much as this fellow is a Kenyan, because there is no single day that you have two chairmen who would undertake this particular exercise. It should be on at a single time one chair. Then this chair cannot be shareable to the 47 number of counties. And therefore, it has to be one single Kenyan. Then we need to agree that, in fact, we should not be boiling small things to become big things, because at the end of the day, whoever can take the mantle can deliver what Kenyans would wish to be delivered.
Okay. Some of these things that are being brought up here, I think oftentimes we shine the light on the drama instead of shining the light on the issue. So if we look at electoral reforms, for example, which, if you ask me, on the underbelly is what this whole IEBC noise is about. If we look at the high cost of living, if we look at, truth be told, that there is a high cost of living, that there is. Cost of living in Kenya is very high today. Several factors then could help to sort out these issues. But I'm going to shine the lights now on Parliament, the lawmaking body in this country, the legislative body. What role do you think Parliament ought to play, not has to play, ought to play in some of these things that, regardless of what side you're on, exist in this country today? Lack of electoral reforms, the high cost of living, subsidies, issues here and there. What do you think ought to be done?
One is that, in fact, in terms of the high cost of living, I would only challenge the unforeseen. And this is the drought, which is making these things so sigy. I would say that, in fact, the plan to bring things in order is that, in fact, we have a lot of laxity there before, because we have been poured a lot of resources in Gurakolana, where no single resource was coming out. But you realize that in fact that wastage of all those resources was purely, I would say, mismanagement of resources. Today, we are in that food security, and where we are going this hand is that we don't have enough in our stores. And why don't we? Sometimes is that we have this element of unpredictable weather, and this unpredictable weather can be only be countered with what we call probably this is the government subsidy in terms of relief foods, because you may give out the subsidy of fertilizer, but the weather change. That means that, in fact, the expectation cannot be realized as you plan. Then what do you do as a government? You cannot watch your people die. You must close other businesses and make sure that you protect your people from hunger, because you cannot also have a nation with such kind of hunger, and you cannot watch your people dying. In this case, I would say what the government, the National Assembly, or what the Parliament can do is to make sure that there is a safety in terms of what we call taking care of every single Kenyan in terms of hunger. That is one thing. Because if you can be able to protect every single Kenyan and make sure that that single Kenyan has a right to have food in his table, that is whether this is come from the farm or whether it is come from the relief, but making sure no single family is starving.
But how do you do that? You see, Mheshimiwa, you have been a councillor. You have been a member of parliament this is your third term, right?
Yeah.
As a member of parliament. You've been in the 11th, the 12th, and now the 13th parliament. When you're talking about all these things, the high cost of living and all, what role, and that's what Ndu is asking, what role should parliamentarians play to make sure that the government, the executive, is actually addressing these issues? Let's just deal with the high cost of living. So yes, there is a high cost of unga, the high cost of commodities, the high cost of everything, high cost of input. There's a drought ongoing. There are people who are not able to feed themselves today. What is it the parliament should be doing? And what is it doing?
In short, these are a battle that cannot be won in a single strike. It's a battle that has to have the short-term solutions. It is a battle that requires also long-term solutions. In short, the short-term solution is to make sure that the government has money to make sure that every household has food. This is, maybe you can be able to save some of the development projects to make sure that you have enough to distribute to the starving people around the country. That is one. Because even though you put a subsidy to that particular unga and bring the unga maybe probably to 150, still that subsidy, in one way or the other, then you are telling us that you are not making any cure of tomorrow. If and probably that, in fact, the lanes that we depend on, which is very seasonal, also require what we call long-term plans. These long-term plans is, we have just destroyed our forest, and therefore we don't have forest covers. Number two, we require irrigations that will require dams. The dams that cannot be able to be sunk tomorrow and provide water at a go. Then those are strategies that you require to plan, put budget for, and then make sure that you implement that project to have enough water for irrigation.
Okay.
Yes.
Did the 12th parliament put any budget? Because there was a drought already last year. By the time we're getting into this current year's budget, the president had already declared the ongoing drought a national emergency. Did the 12th parliament factor in the fact that we have drought, so we have had unreliable rainfall, so we are not going to have crops, so we are going to have a food situation facing us? By the time we were talking about this, by the time we were passing the budget in June or in April, Ukraine had already been invaded by Russia. So all those things were at play. What did the 12th parliament do?
One thing is that, in fact, you need also to understand, and I have just told you very well, that the parliament it depends on what we call the priorities of the day. You may having a different opinion, but if your opinion don't get the requisite numbers, then your dream will perish from there. And that's why we must always allow the majority to move, but the minority always have their say. That does not mean that, in fact, despite there was no such a budget in, that there were no minds which were at least looking for that particular direction. But in terms of vote, when the vote comes, then you have to agree with me that the vote is carried by the majority, and you have to pass the budget as the majority wishes.
Let's take a break.
That's what brought us here, without such kind of intervention.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Our guest this hour, the Honourable James Gakuya, MP for Embakasi North constituency. And like he has told us, it's the smallest of the Embakasis. So there's East, West, North, South, Central. North is the smallest and represents the people of Dandora and a bit of Kariobangi North, as we know it. Now, you talk about the bottom-up economic model and the bottom-up people and the people that you represent, Mheshimiwa. Do you think they are facing the issues that are being talked about in the country today? High cost of living, not being able to afford food on a daily basis. Do you think they are also facing the issues of looking for livelihoods, lack of jobs and opportunities, and all those others that are being raised? Do you think they're facing those?
One is that, in fact, they are not exceptional. Because, there hasn't been that proper planning, and especially for those who live in the city. And you realize that city sometimes is being taken as a place where people are well up, and the answer which is not. And you realize that even during sharing like this, what we call it is food, Nairobi is nowhere in the map of relief food. But they have a lot of needy people who require also to be in the package of relief food. Because we have those old women who probably are forgotten and nobody cares for them. And they are in big number. We have informal sector, which carries a lot of population, and it has to be considered as an area of hardship, where relief food should be mandatory to such areas. I would say that, in fact, taking into consideration that, in fact, even my constituency still has those areas of informal sectors, then area is something to do with those area of foodstuffs. It is there, and I has been in a big mountain. Taking care of especially those old women and old men, because some of them they have their children who never come back to check for them, and actually you cannot forget that they are existing.
Am I hearing you to say that your constituency is basically a hardship area?
It is, yes. And it is. And I can tell you for sure, going by the application of bursaries, it tells you then how the figures are. Because at a single strike, like now, I'm just heading to issue bursaries. But you find that, in fact, the secondary schools only, without touching the tertiary, you have 10,000 applicants. Okay. This gives you now the concept of the whole constituency. It tells you it is a hardship area.
Okay. Can we take your constituency then and apply the same situation to the rest of the country? Because I'm still coming back to this issue of the things that we are saying are then being agitated for in this mass action today.
I am saying...
So can we say that the things that are happening in Embakasi North are then an example, or if we can extrapolate to the rest of the country, is this happening around the country? Is it a problem that Kenya is facing?
Yes, it is a problem that is all over.
Okay.
It's only that the way we are approaching it is the wrong way.
Okay.
Because Kenya as a Kenya, and our problem is we need also to at least come and listen together as Kenyans and find ways of how to fight with our issues together. But taking matter to streets and destructing businesses and all this manner are not the cure, and at the end of the day, it won't help a lot.
Okay.
But I think it is of important for readers to come together and listen together, because you have an idea, I have an idea, and somebody else have an idea. Then bring the idea together. Then let us look for a solution to deal with the monster in the stage. And I think that's the best way to approach our problems. But it doesn't mean that once we move and we destroy businesses and we shut Nairobi today, that we have succeeded and our crime has been listened and the goals has been won. That is not the way. The way is bring your mind close. Let us reason together. At the end of the street, I am sure that it's not above that a law that actually you cannot accept such a forum to discuss and exchange ideas on how we can deal with the monster stage. I think that's the best way to go to approach our problems. But I cannot stand to say that we are not serving. Kenyans are starving, and there is a problem out there.
Okay, so based on what you've said, so are you saying essentially that His Excellency the President, William Ruto, ought to sit at the table with opposition leader Raila Odinga and have a conversation about how some of these things can be fixed? Is that what you're saying?
Of course, such a table is not a long table. The only long table is a table to discuss politics, to share power. That's only the table I cannot agitate to. But a table which can be able to talk and share Kenya's problems that are existing, it is quite welcome.
Why do we need the President and Raila to talk when you have members of Parliament from both divides in the House?
I am telling you...
Why can't we see this conversation happening in the House so that we have a proper motion in House or a proper debate happening in the House on how best can we address these issues? Parliament, you are budget making, you are law making, you are oversighting. Whatever you tell the President to do, he will obey. Because you oversight him.
Of course, I can be able to stand to say those interventions are well taken care of. We had a supplementary budget which has given enough money for to take care of the relief foods, which was well budgeted. And in this particular current budget, still we have a stake to take that particular interest.
But you've just said that things are bad. You've just given Embakasi North as an example and said we don't have enough. You're leaving here to go and supply bursaries.
One is that in fact, when we have such a serious drought, and there is now enough from the farms, then you must understand things are not going well, because the prices must shoot, because the rest of the commodities are in terms of supply. Then the market also becomes a helter-skelter. And that's why the gap is so big, because you may expect to get a bag of maize from as little as 3,500. But depending on the situation, you cannot realize that. The least you can get is from 6,000 shillings. That tells you that there is no magic you can get from the mirror, because the mirror will buy this maize at that level of 6,000, and you expect him to also to recover his cost after that cost of production. It gives you now back to where we are, and therefore those are areas that, in fact, don't we have interventions? Still, we need a lot so that at least we can be able to achieve where our targets are.
Mheshimiwa, where the problem arises is in the area of what we call optics. Because when a government is elected, the assumption is that it's elected in based on what they said they would do. Now, when you have an educated population like the ones we have in Kenya, they watch and they observe and they count. It's not what is happening, what you said you would do. How you said you would address this problem that we have. And if year in, year out, well, it's month in, month out, not year in, year out, the pressure that people felt at the time of the election last year and this year is still the same. Everything you say is logical and it is true. Some of these things are really not within the control of the government, but we don't want to know. If you were elected and you said you would solve the problem, we will be asking the question, why are you not solving it? You said. That is the question that will be asked. You are the one who came and told us. Now, the effort that is being made to resolve these things, if it's in Parliament and a supplementary budget is created, that's in the future. And yet the problems we're dealing with are present, continuously in the present. So there is a disconnect. We are talking about plans to resolve these problems, and yet the problems keep persisting. So if you find the public disenchanted, it is for a reason. They are looking and they're saying, okay, we've heard, but we don't see. That's one. Two, if you look at how then the government goes about its functions, some of these things may even seem irrelevant. And in many cases in Kenya, they don't matter. Whether you employ 60 CASs or 150 CASs, ordinarily it doesn't matter. But when the word in everyone's mouth is hunger and the inability to determine whether you're going to eat tomorrow, everything that is done that involves spending more money, even if it is logical and it has some benefit, it will not be seen because people are thinking with their hunger and their desperation. So if the government does not address this very important thing, the demonstrations that you're hearing about, you then ask yourself, is it that Raila Odinga and his people have led people to demonstrate, or are they simply understanding that people are dissatisfied and they're standing in front of the crowd and saying, okay, let us lead you with your dissatisfaction? What really are we dealing with?
Well, I totally agree with you that, in fact, the promises were fair, and everybody who takes positions actually have to fulfill the pledges. But as the fulfilling of the pledges are part of ideally the duty and has to be fulfilled, then I think there is always importance of people understanding the situations as they are. Because this government, one thing, is not a government which came in and alive in where there was enough money in store to start doing things. Then one thing we must also understand is that it started collecting revenue, like any other government, which because this is the way to go. And out of those revenues is where then you spar and you know where to distribute, where to and which are the priorities to take fixed fast. And before anything else, I believe we must think of how to deal with hunger, because hunger, when somebody is hungry, I am telling you, there's nothing he can understand, and therefore it's a duty that, in fact, the government is doing very, 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 very strongly. But I would say that we need to make sure that they exit it and make sure that they are fixing it as soon as possible, that every single household can be able to be assured of a meal a day. That to me, I am of that concern, because I have such kind of victims which are sleeping foodless, and it's an issue that also is totally disturbing, even in where I represent.
Do you feel the supplementary budget addressed this issue?
It can partly address, but it can't hold address.
So after
and in such a situation, that's why the government has invited well wishers of this country to bring into a center raising of resources which can also assist in this particular area.
But Mheshimiwa, this is it. The supplementary budget, and looking at the amounts that were allocated to the various functions, all right?
Yeah.
Look at the amount that went into addressing those very needs that we're talking about. All right, so increasing the subsidy to purchase fertilizer for farmers, or subsidy to bring in maize into the market, or the money that went into basic relief. Juxtapose that with the money that has gone into other functions, like how much money has gone into the presidency, how much money has gone into running government, how much money are we spending on a daily basis on just operations of government on a daily basis, which is fueling vehicles, buying new cars and all.
Funding travel.
And funding travel. If you look at those and you pass that supplementary budget, do you feel that you really honestly addressed what is really paining Kenyans?
One thing I would say that, in fact, that by the time of approval of the supplementary budget, most of those areas interventions were looked into, because if it is an issue to do with those travel and those other expenditures are unnecessary. Most of them were shelved. And I would say, despite that, in fact, we have offices which you cannot say that they are not going to run. They should also have budget. Because you can't tell me that you have a presidency office which will not require a budget. Then how the president will be able to serve the nation if he's starved? How is his deputy going to serve the mass if he's starved? Then those are also areas that we cannot stand to say they don't require to be supported in budget. But that does not say, or that does not mean that those great need areas of concern should not be taken care of, and especially that particular area I'm talking about. And I have just said very clearly that in fact the government has taken what we call interventions, because it has allowed importation of maize in a tune of maybe 500,000 bags. And I am sure that, in fact, shortly that maize will be in the country. And I am sure that those are some interventions that also will assist in bringing this kind of cost of living down. I am sure that, in fact, the government also has taken care of making sure that the relief package is expanded to reach those other areas that actually have not able to. Also, not forgetting that we have other 47 governments out there, which are county government, which also will be required to be seen taking some interventions, because they are also government.
Yep.
And they should also be taking part in this particular area of hunger. There's no single county that cannot be seen also as doing part of this drive, to make sure that they also subsidize what the government is doing, so that together we can achieve and arrive into that particular the problem. And that is the way to fix it. And that's what I'm saying. I am not opposing those other ideas that can be able to come out from other thinkers, and especially like what Raila Odinga is talking about. But also don't forget, he has a representative in the parliament, because the parliament is in a model of minority and majority, and he has a team which also require to bring this also a concern in the house, so that at least they can be addressed there, and action can be taken from that particular angle. So he's well represented, and that's what I'm saying. It's only that he don't want to go that route, and he has taken the other route.
He has a minority in the government, does he not? And as you said, when it comes to a vote, the majority will actually carry the day.
But all the times, it depends on what subject is on the floor. If it's a subject of national matter, I think the vote can go squarely to every side.
Let me ask you this question, Mheshimiwa. I'm talking as a layman here. If I look at the 12th Parliament, of which you are a member, and we look at just one issue, the issue of managing food security in the country, essentially ensuring that people can eat, and that the money that goes to those who are elderly and those who are not able to sustain themselves is given regularly. Something as simple as that, okay? That whole 5 years, it was a discussion. We haven't been on air for 5 years, but we've had this discussion right from the day we started, which is over 3 years ago. Simple things that the government or that particular parliament talk about oversighting, but we see no change. And yet they have the power to bring about the change. They actually have the power. Then comes the 13th Parliament. Now, if we were to look at both the 13th, let's even go to the 11th, and ask ourselves, surely these parliaments, that these people whom we elect, do they really have the interest of the people who elect them? Honestly. And this is not somebody, you don't point at one person. You see, because it's parliament as a body. If we say that our parliament, in terms of function and ability to actually serve the interests of the Mwananchi, is moribund, meaning it's on its deathbed, for all purposes, it is a walking dead. You see it, but it's not really alive. I say this because if people are going hungry, there is a parliament, it is functioning. They get their salaries paid, meaning we pay you to continue doing the work, and then the work we pay for isn't being seen. The least common denominator of our society cannot determine whether tomorrow they will feed. And we have a parliament. Now, surely, Mheshimiwa.
Honestly, what I would say then the answer is that in fact, as much as the parliament registrates, it's also have a duty to oversight. That therefore tells you the duty of those committees which are assigned to those departmental is to make sure that they oversight what is happening. And once we have an issue in that area of agriculture, because it's an area where the food security is domiciled, I think something wrong was there, because intervention were made and budgets were being made, and that's why I told you that there was a lot of money pumped to Ura Kulalo in Tana River, but squarely we scored 0. And that kind of intervention is where I can say we did wrong, because we spend the resources, but nothing prudent come out of it. I would say that in fact the mistake was there, and the oversight committee also didn't report in good time to the House to state the state of the situation out there. But I would say in fact we need to change our plan from doing things our own. We bring in partners who will be able to put in their resources, and then allow them to do farming of those areas of food security. Then provide land as a government. And I think going by those arrangements, we will be getting out of this problem, because one, we will do it as a business, and he cannot be able to stand to lose. But once it has been quite clear that in fact whatever is governmental is a fail at the end of the day. That's why we have having a nosedive of most of the things that where the government stands. We have a nosedive of KQ, we have a nosedive of a hotel like Intercon, we have a nosedive of Mumia's sugar and many other things. Whatever, because you realize there's a sugar cane factory here, which is public, which can't perform. But just across, you have another private, which is performing. Then you cannot tell me that actually it is failure of management, which is aching or which is killing us. And therefore, what we need to do is to make sure that if you can't do it our own, let us privatize. Let us allow other partners to take charge and give us a result.
As we conclude the conversation, Mheshimiwa, what do you tell the people of Dandora today? Should they, those that would want to participate in a demonstration, in a protest, what would you tell them?
I would want to tell my voters and my constituents that demonstrations will not give us cure, and therefore let us not involve ourselves in those demos. Kindly, I urge you, let us look for other avenues to address our problems.
What are those other avenues?
The avenues are there, and I am sure areas of great concern is one, that area of food security, of which I am very sure that in fact we are doing something under that area. I told you very well that actually Nairobi was not part of that basket of food relief, but we have negotiated it, and the government has agreed to also put Nairobi as part of it, and therefore I am sure that in fact that's a window also that will also be able to be given to us.
Yep.
And number two is that in fact in terms of creation of jobs, is an area of a big concern, because we must revive our industries if we need to also to raise up the ratio of our jobless. So as Nairobi it is, I'm sure it's a difficult place, because our youths are totally jobless, and once they are jobless and their pocket is empty, then there's a serious hurdle there behind.
Mheshimiwa James Gakuya, thank you very much for joining us. Mheshimiwa Gakuya is a member of Parliament for Embakasi North constituency in Parliament for his 3rd term. Keep it here for more. Good morning.